Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is a Freight Coach podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. And today's guest is definitely going to deliver that. It's very challenging to build a business. Contrary to what you see on LinkedIn and everywhere else, it is very challenging to do it year in and year out and hit that continued growth, especially on the trucking company side of things. And today's guest has been doing this for like 20 years. And I've seen his posts out there and I'm like, there is nobody else who I want to come on than this guy to talk about his journey. So with that being said, I got my man, Tristan Bordallo, on the show. So Tristan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. It's an awesome intro.
No, like we were saying before we started recording, like I'd seen you pop up on my feed, and then, I was listening into a couple of your posts, and then I had heard you on, I think you were on the Broker Carrier Summit podcast with Dan Lindsay or something a couple weeks back. And I'm like, man, I got to get this guy on my show because you had said something, and you might be able to clarify this, but I heard it as you essentially said, man, people just need to worry about their own business more to actually get the results in it instead of worrying about what somebody else was doing. And I was like, that's been like my mantra here for the last couple months. And then especially all this year, I'm like, man, I got to focus on me more than anything else.
Absolutely, man. It's like, everyone wants, I'm in California where there's so many regulations, and the last thing we want is more regulations. I think as a business, or, just if you own one truck or you own one brokerage and you're just an agent, at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. I talk about responsibility a lot. You're responsible for your business, and we are the ones that can make things happen. We can't have the government, come in and try to tell us what to do. I mean, come to California. When I talk to a lot of guys saying, oh man, I don't want, especially when they're like, oh, I can't bring my truck into Cali because there's too many regulations, but yet you want, regulations here for transparency. But I'm like, and then what? Right? Like, we still have to meet the requirements of the shippers. Like, no one's trying to understand that business. Like, the more you learn about a certain, part of this business, the better you'll be able to navigate it. But if it's only one thing you're seeing and that's all you're closed to everything else, you're never going to solve the problems that you set out to solve anyways.
Yeah. And that's been, that's been one of my most constant things over my I'll be coming up on 5 years of being self-employed here is, getting customers is a lot harder than everybody thinks that it is out there, but then retaining them for the long term is another challenge in itself. Right. And I think that the more that I was like externally looking for anything, I was avoiding doing like the actual work required for like actually building a sustainable business. And, you've grown your company up. So I guess, see, this is the thing, man, like we've already been chatting, like, dude, I don't even ask my leading question. How'd you get your start in freight? Let's start there. And then I'll ask that question.
Well, I started in LTL sales, right? Like in LTL sales back then in 2004, it was all about selling rates. It was so easy because, there's not a lot of competition, and you just go up to a customer and say, hey, what's your discount like? And back then it was 70%. And I'm like, oh, well, what if I could give you 73%? So it was really easy. But then after doing that for a couple of years, you live and die by the price. You start to realize, okay, where else can I be of value to this customer? I would turn down truckloads or, open decks, which I know that's your jam. And those are the things that I was like, wow, there's actually more work to do in that type of business. And in 2009, that's how I got to a guy that I met on the sales floor at Diversified. We put our business together and had the agency for Covenant. So, but this whole time I've been 1099, like 3 months into freight, like I landed an awesome account, and I don't care. I'll say it was a Canon Security Safe. Like I went from making $2,000 a month to like $10,000 a month. Yeah. And I went upstairs and I said, look, I want to be just like the 50-50 reps. And back then it was 50-50 for the agency model. And it wasn't really an agency. You're just going to go 1099 versus W-2. So that's how I did. Fell in love with it, man. And I haven't had to get a job for 21 years,
Yeah.
or going on 21. So it's doing a lot of it, like what you were saying, you're avoiding it, right?
Yeah.
Of course, that's the hardest thing to do. But I think a lot of people are avoiding that same thing too, because you always got to talk to your customers. Every customer is different, and you could figure out, okay, how can I meet that customer's requirements or those demands? And I don't think people are talking about it. They just, it is hard. They
Yeah.
always say, oh, brokers are making a lot of money. But yeah, of course. But you are also going out there and talking to the customers.
Yeah.
And now I figured it out though. Like as a carrier now, I have to actually care more about a carrier than the carrier cares about themselves, because they just don't know.
What do
And
you mean by
education is a
that?
big piece.
What,
Well, the thing is, it's so hard. I had no idea. 16 years of brokering, I thought I knew it all, right? Like you
yeah.
see a lot. But man, first year in owning trucks, I was like, God, this is why everyone goes out of business. It is so tough. You got to know your costs. You got to have runway. You got to have, you have to have your bank requirements, right? Yeah. And then you also have to learn the carrying the money part, where in brokerage, you could have 30, 45 days. You could call and say, hey, I'm late, but you can't do that with fuel. You can't do that with insurance. You can't do that with equipment. Yeah, right. It's a lot harder. There's the requirements of actually paying your vendors and keeping your credit up. It's tough. And a lot of these guys just, and then taxes at the end of the year, right? They think, oh, I got all this money. And then they didn't plan their expenses correctly, or didn't buy that equipment in like 2 months time. Like they should be up on that, because you're a business. At the end of the day, whether it's one truck or a gazillion trucks, it's still a business. You're still gonna have to learn the tax part.
Dude, I'm right there with you. And I've actually, because I've had the CPA for my company on the show. I've had my contract attorney on my show as well to talk about a lot of these things, because it's always, to me, man, it's going to boil down to like the fundamentals. The blocking and tackling of business is what keeps you sustainable through up markets and down markets, and understanding how to leverage your business to actually maximize your profits. That was another major learning curve from me, right? Because I was like, oh, if my revenues are $1,000 and I spend $800, I make $200. And then my CPA is like, oh, hold on, let's actually structure this a little bit differently. Hey, let's go buy this equipment for your company, and then we can write that off, and then you save a bunch here. And again, man, that's a business in itself. And I think hiring a CPA is like probably the most important step you can make in business, because they help you understand the tax code a lot better than most people. Like a lot of people say, man, it's like, dude, like some businesses, it's not that they're doing anything wrong. They're just using what the tax code is there for.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Like I always say, man, if you have to learn the taxes, I think that's number one. If you're going to be a 1099, even though you're not a corporation or S corp, or you got to learn it, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to pay these back, and it's all about tax planning. So a CPA is definitely number one. Like the most important person in a company would be a CFO, right? Knowing your runway, and you're talking about revenue and your churn, right? Like they know what strings to pull. So there's all these levers that you have. I'm like, oh shoot, am I spending too much here? Well, what can I do here? Because the end of the year is going to look like this. Yeah. So a CPA will tell you that. I mean, shoot, a good CPA will only cost you $200 a month.
Yeah.
And you have them on retainer. You'll be able to call them. So it would be unwise to not pay a CPA when you're starting off.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And so like when you were building up your fleet here, what are some of how many trucks do you have in your fleet right now?
8, and we're trying to get to my goal is to try to get to 15.
Okay. And then is that as big as you want to go, is 15 trucks?
Oh yeah. When I first started, I wanted to go to like 100, 200, but then I realized the responsibility, the risk, liabilities, and then the psychology of drivers, and the psychology of just running this business. Like everyone thinks there's just a guy willing to drive a truck for them.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy unless and I don't have, money from a VC that I could just go out and spend just in case. I'm not running a business through VC money. It's all me. I've been bootstrapped this whole time, all 21 years, all me, right? So no one helps me. So I have to be really smart with money, but that's just how it goes. Like you can't grow that unless, and I'm not that smart, right? Like the other guys that are like, I heard those guys, Cal Freight, like double pledging. I'm like, wow, they have so many businesses. Their credit goes here and here. It's like double pledging. Like, if you guys think double brokering is horrible, look up double pledging. That's the guys we're hiring to do these rates. And that's the reason why they could do it for these rates. It's because they have financial engineering. And I don't know that stuff.
Yeah, no, but I think knowing where you want to go with your business is extremely beneficial, right? Because I feel like, the natural curve of a lot of people is when they get into business, everybody thinks they're going to be a millionaire within 6 months. Like, as soon as you file your LLC, you're like, I'm going to be loaded in 6 months. And then the realization starts to come in like, damn, nobody actually cares who I am or what I do. And then you get one customer, and then it's all about filling those gaps. And then after a couple of years, you come to realize like, hey, I'm only going to do one thing. This is as big as I want to go, or this is the business I want to build. And then you put all your time and energy into it. And I talk about that a lot on this show, because like my only concern right now is hitting my daily sales calls and hitting a certain revenue in this year, in this calendar year. That is the only thing I'm concerned about. Where we go in the next 10 years, like, yes, I have my long-term goals, Tristan, but like my short-term goals are only like, am I going to hit my 45 calls today? That is and then, tomorrow I'm going to show up with a smile on my face and I'm going to do it all over again, because I'm getting hyper-focused in what we're going after. And then again, back into we just move open deck freight, right? Like, we're going to do full truckload open deck, and that's going to be it. And that's going to be our hyper focus for the time being. And then after we hit certain revenue multipliers, then we'll discuss what's the next step down there. And for you to know that, like, how much stress does that take off of your shoulders to know like, hey, this is our goal. This is what we have to go to essentially double our fleet from where we are right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't focus on revenue, right? Like, I've learned that a long time ago. I just focus on what I can control. Like you could control 45 calls, right? Like, focus, get that right, and everything else will fall into place. But if you're playing catching up to the guy with all this revenue, you have no idea what's on the back end of how that's actually happening, right? Or how much money of that is actually theirs. So you're chasing something that might not even be real. So if you just chase, like, as a bootstrap owner, just do your 45 calls. For me, it was like, okay, how long can I keep this customer for?
Yeah.
How long can I keep them on the phone for? Like, those are my KPIs. When I'm on the phone with someone, I know if I can keep them there for an hour talking about just life, I'm going to have this customer for life, because it's going to be my turn. And the person that doesn't do that because they're focusing on revenue, they're focusing on other stuff, they're not really focusing on the service part of it and building the relationship, they're going to lose, because their turn it's going to be over, and it's going to be your turn. Mm-hmm. And if you're and it's all about growth, responsibly growing. Because you don't want to leave collateral damage behind. I can't imagine, growing my brokerage and not paying the carriers because I went out of business because I was chasing something that wasn't good for my business, right? Because I was going for revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I can't sleep at night, right? Like, people that talk about revenue all day. I mean, dude, revenue is vanity, man, and cash is king, and profit is sanity. So.
Dude, I'm right there with you. And that's one thing that, I think over these last couple of years, especially within transportation, when you're seeing all these massive raises in these companies that are going on out there, it's like, yeah, revenue is one thing, right? Like, you might be $1 billion a year company, but if you have 1% margins and, and you're burning capital at $10 to $1 you make, a lot of the fallout is kind of going to be there, right? Like, and that's one thing that I'm starting to really realize a lot here, Tristan, and a lot of the people that I'm going to go after to have on my show this, in the foreseeable future is like, I want to talk to the people who have built profitable companies, right? Like, have positive cash flows, that have bootstrapped it and everything else, to talk about those tactics. Because like, again, if you can go out there and raise capital, I'm not against venture capital or anything like that. I'm not going to, I don't look at anything differently, but I think that talking to somebody who has actually built a company that's doing, 10 million a year in revenue or 15 million a year in revenue, and they've bootstrapped their way up there, they look at a dollar a lot different than the company that took 100 million in investment. I mean, look at the stats that are out there on VC-backed companies that go out of business. Why do they go out of business? Is it their product, or is it just mismanagement of financials? And I think that the more and more you dig in, I think it's more mismanagement of financials, because it's a lot different when you have to work for a dollar as opposed to if you're given a dollar.
Yeah, I mean, the goal of that is to exit, right? My goal is to stay in the game.
Yeah.
So it's different, right? You got to ask the why. So I'm, you know, Simon Sinek says it. You want to play a finite game or an infinite game. And you know, I don't care if I didn't get $1 billion and raise $100 million. I'm still playing 21 years later. I haven't had to go get a job.
Yeah.
So like I'm winning, you know, and it's not even winning. I'm still in the game. So
Yeah.
I did get sad in 2016, man. I remember sitting there at Covenant going, man, all these big, you know, all the digital brokerages started to come and they were like VC backed. And then, you know, everyone wanted this platform. And I was like, God, and that's what started the whole idea of having assets. Cause as a broker, I was obviously threatened, right? Like, okay, this is going to take over my job. So let me start learning how to, you know, be on that demand. I mean, on the supply side. So
Mhm.
I went to go think about buying trucks. It took a long time to save up for that. So 2016, I didn't launch this thing till September of 2018. I didn't haul my first load until December 3rd. So there's 3 months of actually, and that was so scary because I put in everything that I had thinking I was betting on, you know, everything changing and I was going to be the guy providing the supply. But
Yeah.
then I realized, oh shit, this is hard, bro. Like this is not at all what I thought it was going to be.
What
So
would you go back in, like, for those people who are starting out, or maybe they're year one in their, let's, whether they're an owner operator, or they just have a couple of trucks, what would you go back now and do differently if you were starting over?
I think what I would do differently is, you know, get more customers that are going to support you in that business before you go out and buy the trucks, right? Like I had one customer and I had to depend on that customer because they were like, okay, because it's Cool Pack, by the way. Cool Pack was an LTL company. I was a customer of theirs for 12 years, and then I knew the owners, and they said, Tristan, why don't you start a trucking company? We'll help you. So I had that. So it's like getting product market fit. So,
Yeah.
but that took care of 50% of it. But then I had to work outside of that sometimes when they didn't have the freight. And so now I started to realize, okay, now you have to get anchor accounts. Like how many accounts can you actually get before you could grow? Not just to grow for the sake of growing, like, okay, I'm going to go out and buy 10 trucks. Because I had 18 trucks at the height of it. Then I realized I'm like, dude, this is so hard to manage with,
Mhm.
and we had owner operators too before all this AB5 stuff. And owner operators, they think they'll just do whatever they want because it's their own business. And that's hard too, right?
Yeah.
Like I started to realize, so like if you want to do this right, you have to consider the customers first. Like,
Yeah.
what do they want? Like, what are their requirements? So that you could go ahead and you always have a best alternative, which you could always go on the spot market, right? And do that. But you have to have anchor accounts, is what I call them, and that's what I'm working on today. And I'm taking that to my brokerage and saying, look, guys, we need anchor accounts.
Yeah.
Anchor accounts are your accounts that are, for me, it's 500,000 in revenue per year, right? And you should have that. And you should work towards that, no matter what you're doing. Just because you land one account that does $4 million in revenue doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to take off my foot off the gas. You
Yeah.
want anchor accounts because you got to remember it's just your turn.
Dude,
It's not your account.
that's the truest statement that's out there, right? Like it's in I think that, I think it's a Pareto principle that's out there. Like 80% of most companies' revenue is tied up to like, 20%. Like there's like two customers essentially that do
Yeah.
80 to 90%. And that's very, very true inside of transportation. Most people that I know inside of this industry, not everybody, because I know a lot of people, but a lot of them have that one anchor account and that mentality of I've been working with them for 5, 10, 15 years or whatever that is. I'm good. They're not going anywhere. I thought that at once too. And I've had to rebuild my book of business a few times because I am very good at thinking I know way more than I actually do. Um, it's getting better the older I get. But, I'm right there with you, man, where now it's like, dude, I want to get to like the 10% rule where every account that we have accounts for 10% of our revenue. And that's it, to where it's like that plug and play. Cause you're very right, man. That's actually the first time I've ever heard it described in that way, man. It's just your time right now because there's a myriad of different things that could happen to where you could lose an account and they can pull the freight at any given moment, right? That's why I'm so big on business development at all times, because you think you're good until you're not, right? And I never thought that way, Tristan, until I own my own business and like I lost like 20% of my revenue and overnight. And I'm like, holy shit. And then again, like most people, when you're doing good in business and revenues are up, you spend all at a lot higher rate than you should because again, you drink your own Kool-Aid. You think, oh, fuck it. people would just be lucky to work with me. And then you get hit with reality a little bit. So I hope people really, whether you're an owner, operator, a fleet, or a broker, what Tristan just said there will literally save you a decade of headache about going out there and just constantly getting those anchor accounts.
Yeah. And, Chris, you said it before. You're talking about losing your accounts, right? Losing 20%. Well, I've had to rebuild my businesses too. It hasn't been like this the whole time, but it's like this, but it slowly goes up, right? The reason why you do that is because you get cocky and you think you know everything, right? So it's your ego, you're a broker, you just landed an awesome account that took you 6 months, and now you're getting everything. And then you do it for 3 years, and then bam, nothing. And if you're bootstrapped, you go from like making this much money to like 80% of that, then you got to rebuild again, get on the phone and do that, versus constantly just doing it, which I'm doing now. Like I'm always out there with my sales reps, right? I'm constantly getting that one account, looking for that next account that's going to replace that bigger account. Because if you think that way, you'll always be in this business. That's why I see a lot of guys, I'm like, why are you working at 6-10 different brokerages?
Yeah.
Right? Like build something, because you didn't build it right. And not to disrespect them. They built it that based on their ego, not based on the ability to like, okay, I want to stay in this business long enough, but I got to do all the hard work. And everyone does front loading, and that's it.
Yeah.
After the front loading part is done, they're like, all right, I could cruise.
Yeah.
Like, no, dude, you can't cruise if you're going to be bootstrapped and you want to stay in this game, because freight sucks. You're going to, that you're cold calling every day.
Every day.
You might cold call before this.
I did. I've already made 20 cold calls today,
That's awesome, man.
And I break it up by region, right? So again, here's a little tip for everybody. I start out east and I work my way west. All right. Because I don't like cold calling people before 10 a.m. their time. This is just a personal preference of mine. And that's how I work it. And I go from east to west with that. But dude, you're so right with that mentality, Tristan. It's because what it is, it's uncomfortable. I might be the only person out there who's willingly admitting that cold calling and cold visits are uncomfortable. All right. I've been selling for 15 years. I still get nervous because guess what? You just don't know what's on the other end. No matter what, no matter how good looking you think you are or fucking in shape you are, you could just catch somebody at the wrong moment. That's just the reality of it. But what you realize is after a while, like it's not you, the individual, it's just that transaction of the day, and you can just compartmentalize it and move on. And that's why so many people, when they get 1 or 2 wins in sales, Tristan, they stop because it's not scary. It's easier to manage a couple of existing customers and then hope that their logos take off and your book of business takes off with them than it is to go out there and get hung up on and told no. But the reality is, you guys, 98, I will say this, 98% of the calls that I make when somebody actually picks up, they're actually pretty pleasant. All right. Because I have a purpose on why I'm calling. I have an actual reason why I'm calling. And it's very different than how it was when I was coming up. And it was just like, hey, give us freight, let us bid. Hey, give us freight, let us bid. It's like, no, actually, this is all I want. Do you actually have that? It's a different conversation. And they look at me as a sales rep a lot differently now than if I was just going out there and fighting for crumbs.
Yeah. And it comes with a lot of experience. You've been doing this for 15 years. You have a podcast, you're out in the public, you're building in public, you're talking about it. I think, and when you reach out to someone, they're like, oh, that's Chris. You're not that guy that's been cold calling because he has to, right? We're cold calling because we really want to, we're there offering value.
Yeah.
And I feel that way. Like when I go somewhere, I'm not really scared because I'm like, look, man, I don't care. I'm here to provide value. You just don't know it yet. I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
A lot of guys are like, oh, I'm here to call you because I have to hit my KPIs and I have to go hit my X calls and then I got to do this, and they don't really care. I mean, the old school brokers that I hang out used to see all my sales reps. They're in their 60s, man. Like we kill it and we have fun. Like and it's not this, because we know we're there to help. Like and people could feel that, right? And that's what. And everyone could be posting like us every single day on LinkedIn. And that's something I did in 9 months. I had no idea I was going to be on all these shows, right? Talking about my story. But like, I was afraid to do that for the longest time. I was like, dude, I don't want to do this. But I know that because I did that, I was one conversation away from changing like the way things could go. Right. Dude. Like you saw me on that when you said Dan Lizzie, I'm like, dude, that blows my mind. Right. Like, I never went to any events in trucking until I saw this broker care summit. I'm like, you know what? Since I've been on this networking thing, I joined the entrepreneurs organization 2 years ago, and it's helped me get out there and said, and told myself, Tristan, you are a person that has a great story and you could
Correct.
talk about it. And I did it. And I committed to posting every single day on LinkedIn for 9 months. And I got on all this show, and I would have never met you if I wasn't doing that. And there's so many guys that are sitting there going, man, I want to do this. I want to do that. But just do the little things. Like, did you even post today to get yourself out there? Or did you make that phone call? Or did you go up to that shipping manager? Did you drive there? Like, did you even just get into your car and put on a polo shirt so you could go out? Like, no. You know what I mean?
Tristan, and that's what I talk about, man, so much is I try and tell people, like, even if you just start with 5, make 5 cold calls a day, do it every day for 10 working days. And then what you'll start to see is maybe it took you 2 hours to make 5 dials because you had it all in your head about, oh, this, that, and that. And then you go through it and you put in the work, and then it wasn't that bad. And then you know what? Little bit of an increase. Now today I'm going to make 10 cold calls a day. If you just adhere to an actual system over the long term, what you'll realize is damn, I can rock out like 45, 50 calls in a day now. And I used to not even be able to pick up the phone to make 5 calls in a day. That's where all the real progress lies in a lot of this, because when your intent behind it is like, I know I can add value. Like, call this arrogance. I know I'm better than their entire network already. I know the value and experience that I could bring to every single prospect that I call. I know I'm better than them. Hell, some of the people who are listening to this show, it's their customers who I'm calling. I just don't know it yet, right? But that's my mentality, because I know for a fact, 100%, if they came to me and said, yes, Chris, I have this step deck load, it has X, Y, and Z associated with it, I know I'm not rolling the dice. I know exactly how I need to handle that situation. There's just that confidence that comes along with it. And that comes in time. But again, it starts with one thing, right? Like, that's how I'm over 1,100 podcasts now. I didn't fucking know what I was doing when I was starting. Dude, I Googled it. I watched YouTube on how to podcast, and then I created it. And now I have the top fucking transportation podcast in the United States of America in 5 years because I started, you guys. And that's all it takes. Just start. You're way harder on yourself than anybody else out there actually is. And what you come to realize, and again, I say this not as being like legitimate, nobody fucking cares about you. All right. You care about you way more than the person that you're calling. They already forgot about you the second they hang up on you.
Yeah, no, dude, there's so much truth to that. That's why I like the passion. I could hear it in your, when I listened to a couple of your podcasts before I got in the show. And you're very passionate about that, right? Like, yeah, who cares what everyone's thinking? There's a lot of guys that are just going to talk smack, and that's okay. Like, yeah. And that's what I had to get over, right? I didn't want that because I want everyone to like me. But at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? Who cares? There's a lot of guys doing nothing, saying everything. And that's not fair for you to stop doing what you're supposed to do. Because if you could offer value to a customer, and if that's their customers, are you mad because like they hit a spot, or you're about to take their spot?
Yeah. No, dude, that's exactly it, right? My mentality is, it boils down to this, Tristan, is I don't talk about my family very often, but my wife has supported me since day one, since when I just started doing all of this. Her opinion is really the only one that I want to make sure is happy with me at the end of the day and actually supports me and likes me. And I know, I already have that W. So everything else is icing on the cake to me. That's my whole mentality with a lot of this is it's like when I go home at night, as long as I know I did what I had set out to do for the day, and I get to look my wife in the eye and she's excited to see me, which most days that she is, but we've been together for a decade. So not every day she's happy to see me. But at the end of the day, man, I can look her in the eye and be like, babe, I tried today. I tried, and I know she supports me. So like, really, when it boils down to it, man, just like when I'm on my deathbed one day, man, like my family's going to be in there, and that's it. So like, those are the people that I'm working for and trying to do all this for. Somebody's opinion out there on the internet is irrelevant, because the reality is, if you saw me in person, you're not going to fucking walk up to me and say it to my face. You're not. You're going to fucking look at me and be like, shit. And then you're going to put your head down and walk the other way. That's the reality of how this goes. So that's why I want more people to tell their stories, because like, dude, it is like, I saw a couple of your stuff. I'm like, man, this guy is somebody who I want to hear. I want to learn from him, because I can tell you've built something. And just in the way that you're describing, so it's like, dude, your story matters. Just like everybody who watches this show, your story matters. Your experiences matter. Tell them, but what's your intent? Is your intent to help people, or is your intent to somehow get something out of it? Where it's like, I'm very fortunate to have advertisers on this show now. I've worked very hard to get to this point to have them, but I do this for free, man, because like, this is what I want to do. I love doing this. I love helping people. When it boils down to it, man, that's all I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a, you could just watch what people do, right? Like it's hard to do what you're doing every single day. Like to have a pod, meanwhile take care of your family, meanwhile take care of business. I mean, and then market yourself, right? Like this new open deck idea that you have, like you're focusing on that, and it's no one really gets that. They always, to me, I always say the same thing. It only matters what I could bring home. My kids are watching. My wife of 15 years, and we've been together for 20 years, and my kids are 10 and 12 now. Like I love when my son looks me up now, because I've been on all these podcasts. He like came up to me and he Googles me, and I'm like, bro, like that would have never happened if I didn't post 9 months ago.
Hell yeah.
Right. Like none of this would have ever happened. So it's one of those things, right? And now it's even gonna get better. Like I just did all the front loading part. And guess what? I'm not gonna stop here. I want to go out there and tell people that they can do what I'm doing as well. I mean, I want to help people, because it's not that hard to, get out there and let people know who you are, so that they could trust you to handle their business. Because if you're calling them and I'm calling the same person that you're calling, guess what? They get to look me up. They don't know who you are yet, right? You're unknown. I'm known, and I'm obviously now some kind of expert, right? And I still don't feel comfortable with that, but I'm calling on the same account as you are.
Yep.
And that's scary, right? Like, because I'd be scared of, like, dang it, Chris, I'm going to call on the same account, but I don't care. I don't really care about open deck. So that's good. Yeah. That's the great thing about this business, right? Everyone thinks that, oh man, it's like scarcity, right? No, man, if you just do a good job, you can have an awesome business, and you don't have to go after the $100 million revenue. Dude, you could have an awesome business at 3 million and kill it for your family, because that's all that matters. But if you're doing it for ego, then you've already lost.
Bro, I 100%. We got to wrap at this, but like, so this book right here, The Revenue Engine, Kara Brown wrote it. She's from the industry, and it's funny you brought that up. There are 20,000 shippers in the United States of America that do 100 million or more in revenue. It's like I literally just read that this morning, so it's funny you brought that up. So tell me that there's scarcity out there, you guys. There's plenty of opportunities that are out there. But dude, I appreciate you joining me, man. How does anybody reach out to you to find out more about what you got going on?
Yeah, just follow me on LinkedIn, Tristan Bordallo. We're redoing our website, I Am Freight and Freighttopia.com. So IamFreight.com and Freighttopia.com. So yeah, I'm revamping everything too, because now I'm out in the public. I'm like, God, my website sucks.
I love it.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. And then Kara's awesome. She's also part of Entrepreneurs Organization. Yep. I connected to her before, and this is the flow of life. Like I always talk about it, right? Like I had no idea she was the president of our chapter. Went to like an MIT or Harvard school. Met Kara, text, hey, Tristan, help Tristan get more business. And I had no idea Kara Brown was this big person in marketing in our industry. So like, yeah, that's again, it's like putting yourself out there, because you'll never know. And yes, that book, I got to start reading that too, because she sent it to us, or her team did. So
it's a good one, man. I'm like 70 pages in right now, and I would highly recommend it. Definitely makes you think a lot differently about things. But that will be it for today, you guys. As always, if you guys got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show. You guys share it out there to your network, because if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon. I don't have any cool outros.